Mornings were just as nice as she remembered. It hadn't become a routine until they were on the ship together, but waking up at the same time, sharing breakfast, growing closer, it all led to their first night together, and so much more. Watching across the counter as Tom got breakfast ready was a simple pleasure she'd forgotten. Once, she'd have been sitting there beside Sheil and Olhai, watching Chanda as he... And that was the problem. She could feel her smile waver, as old memories stirred and stared down at her tea, brooding over what Ganya had said. Tom said as much the night before, about he wanted to discuss their future soon. She didn't think he was unhappy with her. Goddess. She didn't want him to become unhappy with her. Miv? Hey, Miv.
Huh? Oh, sorry. What was that?
She looked up, startled, and wondered how many times he'd called her name. Tom had something cooking on the stove, but was looking at her quizzically. I asked what your day looks like, and if you want to meet up for lunch. Hey, what's up? You look miles away there.
I was just thinking about my appointments. I have a few, but I probably could. Want to meet at noon on the Commons?
That sounds good. I'm meeting with Deshin and Jaxme to start work on the library collection, and one of the music professors asked me to meet with her about something.
Just something?
Mivere breathed a silent prayer to Thoria for the change of subject. While it was a conversation that needed to be had, only a fool would navigate a dangerous reef without careful planning. Or maybe forethought would be a better word there.
What is it about?
Tom shrugged and must have grimaced as he turned back to the stove. That's just it, I don't know exactly. She set the appointment without an explanation in the text, so I don't have any idea. It's a little annoying, but I figured it can't hurt to meet some more of the faculty. No harm in talking, right?
Certainly.
Mivere felt a yawning pit in her stomach, the size of an ocean.
There's no harm in talking. 2 items from box 1138. Professor, what is this?
Deshin frowned, as she peered at the object in her hands. Tom looked up to see what was next. Kellark had offered to take dictation, and was jotting down his notes on each item, as Deshin and Scifi rotated into Container 1, bringing out a box at a time. They'd all put on gloves just as he'd instructed, and were handling everything with exaggerated care. While Tom hadn't expected any of the others to join Deshin and Jaxme, it had sped things along. Jaxme Chalkser was sitting over to the side, around the area he'd set up for the Asia exhibit. Most of the items weren't clothing, but there had been an occasional muffled squeal as something was revealed, and she looked like a kid at their first candy store. Not far away, Melondi and the Kerbal sisters were over in the music section, performing the task of uploading more video files. Save for their hairbands, the girls looked identical as ever, but the one with the red band was staring raptly at an ocean case with a Fender Stratocaster. With only one of the twins in the orchestra, that was likely Kaslin. Meanwhile, Kellark stayed beside Tom, entering notes into the Omnipad. Oh, those are called a Rubik's Cube. Put it in the entertainment category for now, but mark the entry. I might change it to art later.
What are they for, though?
Kellark was staring intently at the cubes, and Tom smiled, wondering if that was how he'd looked in Jama Hemeris' exhibits the other day. Mostly, causing aggravation, he said with a chuckle, but shrugged when Kellark gave him a sharp look. Okay, I know, not helpful. Jot down an entry that they're a puzzle game, invented by a human sculptor and architect named Rubik about 30 years ago.
They don't look very puzzling,
Kellark said doubtfully, as Deshin held them up for a better look, just as Scifi returned with the next box. It's fine, I brought 2. Leave the one as it is for the display and hand me the other one. Tom took one of the cubes from Deshin and turned his back on the girls, giving the cube 10 twists before turning back to the trio and holding it up. Alright, who wants to solve it? The girls peered at the cube as he held it up.
It's all scrambled up,
said Kellock after a moment. That's right, nodded Tom, and offered it over. Tell you what, these are pretty durable as long as you don't drop them. Since you pitched in today, you can try and solve it first, Miss Kellock. Give it back to me or Deshin when you're done with it. Kellock looked at the cube in her hands, and seemed ready to ask a question when the alarm on his omnipad went off. Oh, hey, girls, I need to meet Professor Pelavon over on the Commons. Everyone seal up the boxes, please, and thank you all for helping out today. Mevere wandered over to the Commons early, still lost in thought. In truth, she hadn't had much to do that morning, but she needed the space to think. Garnia's warning about keeping secrets from Tom kept running through her mind, and over the last few days she had only grown more apprehensive. The grounds were quiet, and she found herself drifting towards a set of benches, looking at the grass below her feet. She decided that Garnia was right. She didn't want to be cruel or callous, but more than anything else, she didn't want to lose Tom. It wasn't like Tom didn't know, but after the first few days went past, she realized he didn't know that he knew. If he didn't know that he knew, then it was something human that she didn't know how to explain. Even worse, she knew she didn't know how to explain to him that he knew but didn't know, and how was just explaining it going to go? What if he got angry with her when he understood? Goddess, what if he got angry with her for not having told him again? She didn't want to lose everything, and they had 3 years ahead, working together. It was just that simple, wasn't it? She knew her thoughts were just chasing her into a corner. Lunch today? She'd have to tell Tom at lunch today, and hope for the best.
Good morning, Professor.
Mevere was jolted from her reverie, and chided herself. That made twice today she'd been caught shell-gathering, and it didn't suit her at all. Looking over to her right, Nestha Roche was seated on the nearby bench, offering up a hesitant wave and a sympathetic smile. Nestha, how are you this morning? Mevere asked, as she changed course and approached the bench. Nestha was tucked on the far end and looked like she'd been working on her omnipad.
Oh, all right. Just working on something,
Nestha said almost defensively, cradling her pad closer before shutting it down.
Anyway, I'm sorry I startled you.
It's all right. Do you mind if I join you? Nestha nodded, indicating the bench beside her. Mevere gave her a smile and settled beside her. The sun was lovely, and it was the kind of day in early fall that always made her want to be outside.
I'm just gathering my thoughts. I have a conversation coming up that I'm not sure I want to have. I'm trying to sort it out, and it's my fault for getting caught off guard. Are you ready with everything you need?
The question was so direct that Mevere had to think about it.
Well, I think so.
Nestha Roche didn't look convinced. After a moment, Miv realized she wasn't convincing herself either.
My birth mother always says that the key to a conversation or an interview is being prepared, being confident, and setting the stage.
Nestha gave an exasperated sigh that would have filled any put-upon teenager in the galaxy with pride and envy.
I expect you've met my mother.
Yes, certainly. She's very active in all the alumni committees and cares very deeply about the academy.
I suppose.
Nestha set her omnipad down and stared at the grass for a moment.
She really is very good at what she does. I just sometimes wish she found something. Well, someplace else to do it. I know it's good advice, but I wish she wasn't always so...
She gesticulated at the air before her.
Here.
Mevere paused a moment to pick through her memory of what the Roche family was known for, but came up empty.
I'm sorry, I don't actually know what your mother does. Have you ever heard of Noble's House, the publishing and journalism company?
Nesta looked almost glum as she asked.
Certainly. They issue about half the texts I read every year.
Mevere canted her head curiously. Nesta wasn't talkative at the best of times, but she was a bright girl, and getting her talking here might help open her up.
Your family is involved with them? My family owns Noble's House. It's into printing, journalism, newscasts. It began a few centuries ago when one of my ancestors was the court poet and biographer to the Empress. These days the company supplies content to about half the networks. And your mother? She always tells me how she started in production and worked her way up to the executive board for the family. That's what she wants for me, too.
Nesta scowled accusingly at the world before looking back to Mevere.
She really is good at what she does, and even if we aren't widely known, it's a good living.
I should think so, Mevere nodded, though the conversation made her feel a rare twinge of guilt over her impoverished house and title. It wasn't something she thought about the way that she should, but given what she had to talk about.
I know she's here a lot too. I mean, I always thought it would be great coming to the academy, and I love my classes. I just didn't think she'd be so involved all the time.
Nesta pulled one of her legs up and was resting her chin on her knee.
She must care a great deal about your education,
Mevere said after a moment. It was the most diplomatic thing she could think of under the circumstances. While she hadn't spent much time around Mavisti Roche, Garnier seemed to consider the woman a necessary evil. It wasn't a glowing reference, and certainly not one to share with Nesta.
She's ambitious.
Nesta looked up from boring a hole in the turf and grimaced.
My ancestor was this important writer, but her daughters weren't, so they decided not to try standing in their mother's shadow, took their fortune and went into publishing her work. I mean, obviously it worked out, and my mother's always tell me it's the best of all possible worlds. We have security, a title, and we don't have to compete with all the important houses or be political. That's even why they called it Noble's House. To make it sound impressive, but without a particular name, everyone would use it. It was just good marketing, but it worked.
Nesta, there's more to life than having an important title. Mevere paused. Tom was across the commons with several of the girls from class. He spotted her and waved, starting her way. And suddenly Mevere didn't feel prepared, confident, or where she wanted to be for what she needed to say.
That isn't it at all, Professor.
Nesta began, but stopped as she followed Mevere's gaze and smiled a bit.
Oh, are you meeting with Professor Warwick?
Well, I was going to. I had an appointment come up, she said, just as Tom and the other girls arrived. Something came up? Asked Tom, as he drew close.
Yes, it's just a complication I need to deal with. Nothing important, she hedged.
Tom looked understanding, and although she wanted to kick herself, Mevere had a growing conviction that she needed more time. Working awkwardly through it over lunch wasn't enough time, and certainly wouldn't be the place. Tom would probably offer to join her too.
I tell you what, since you're open until this evening, why don't you and the girls go out to lunch?
Tom looked uncertain, though the girls looked excited, and Mevere pressed her advantage.
Girls, I know you're all raised well. You can't allow Professor Warwick to eat alone. He needs a proper escort.
Any protest died under a chorus of agreement from the girls, and Mevere felt relief flooding through her as the girls started to talk animatedly. Tom shot her a questioning look, and Mevere smiled back innocently.
Professor, did you know there's a human restaurant just off campus? Asked one of the twins.
Tom's head snapped around to look at the curveball girl. What did you say, Caslin?
I heard about it too, said Scifi,
while the curveball girl turned to stare at her sister.
It opened off campus in Preliatori, the service town between here and the palace. Only about 10 miles. One of the girls in my economics class went. She said it was, interesting.
Human food? You're certain? Tom asked incredulously. He looked utterly sidetracked to Mavere, and it was only a short drive. Still, if Tom backed out...
Just someone an autocab. My treat, Mavere said brightly. I know you girls are busy, but I don't want him going into town alone. Please, consider it a human study. I'll even kick in 2 points of extra credit.
Mavere thought that sealed the deal nicely, as the girls bobbed agreement. Glancing down, she saw Nesta closing up her omnipad and set a hand on the girl's shoulder.
You too, Nesta. Professor, I have to... That was some good advice you gave me, Nesta. I insist,
Mavere said sternly, though she might have arched an eyebrow just a tiny bit. Nesta gave her a sharp look, reading between the lines, but glanced uncertainly over at the other girls.
Sure, if the others don't mind.
Her misgivings were drowned in a chorus of encouragement, while Jacksmy and Scifi busily poked at their underpads to find the address and summon a ride. Mavere gave Tom one more smile as she said her goodbyes. She kept her pace steady as she headed away from the Commons. A lady of her station should walk, but never run. Burdin Desari was not a happy man. After months of negotiations and cajoling from his cousin, Nixie, on Earth, he'd given up his job as a chef at one of the best restaurants in the capital, opted into their business, and opened a place of his own with visions of someday retiring with a wonderful franchise. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, she'd said. Unbelievable, she said. Looking around the empty restaurant, he wondered if he could get his old job back. It wasn't that the location was bad. Far from it. Prinatori was the closest service town to the gates of the Imperial Palace itself. Well, the seaside palace rather than the palace in the inner city. And if the prince just happened to come by... to get a royal seal of approval. With the prince consort out of the system, that hadn't happened, and it would be a gross understatement to say the results weren't making him happy. Anyone could open a curbside food stand. It'd taken most of his savings to get 3 months' rent on a nice place. There was even a terrace looking over the river. The growing certainty of failure was making him despondent. The lack of marketing might have been the problem, but paying for the regular shipments his cousin sent from Earth, the rent, salary for the waitstaff, there just hadn't been money left over. Usually, anything human could find a ready market. It was a trial upon his soul. He was a chef, an artist. Marketing wasn't supposed to be something he had to deal with. Even the names he considered didn't seem to help. His cousins had explicitly told him not to call it Serving Man, and inexplicably offered up Chez Levis. While he wasn't opposed to being part of the business, he knew name recognition was important, and he had a reputation to build. After a week with virtually no customers, he closed down for a day and changed the name. Much as it pained him, it was too obscure for ethnic food. It seemed it would never be his Bistrot de Burdin. Human food. The name was so bland, so pedestrian. While it pulled in a few curious tourists, most didn't seem to like what they had and just left. Repeat traffic had been non-existent. He'd been open less than a week and failure loomed on the horizon like a gathering storm. Burdin looked up, hopefully, as the door chime sounded. Thank Raphael, he had customers. He had schoolgirls by the look of it from the academy. He had... Burdin froze. He had a human. Tom looked around the restaurant and picked out a table for 10, musing on the size of Shulvanti family settings. Deshin promptly dropped into the chair at his left, followed down the line by Melondi and Kellogg, while Sefir, The Kerbal twins and Nestha settled on the road to his right. The girls were all looking around expectantly, and Tom took in the decor. Overhead, the speakers were playing. Dear gods, it was Muzak, and it was playing Valère. Things looked better as he took in the interior. It was comfortably furnished, and Tom made out nicely framed posters of the Sydney skyline, London, Seattle, and New York. That made sense, given the natural flora and fauna might appear similar on any number of worlds. The place was clean, tasteful, a bit of a bent towards purple, but not bad. Not bad at all. Ladies, I've not eaten here, so I can't tell you anything more than, yes, those are pictures from Earth. I know, not purple. Tom paused as he spied one of the three Shorvanti men in the back, gesturing frantically at the other two. Since he was rather better dressed, the other two must be waiters. As he watched, the man hurried over to their table, looking at their group anxiously. "Good afternoon, young ladies. My name is Burdin, and your waiters will be with you shortly. Welcome to Human Food." He bowed politely to the girls, before turning to Tom, swallowing audibly, and speaking in a much higher-pitched and heavily accented English. "Hello." "Good afternoon." Tom tried to hide his smile. "It's all right. I speak Vatica." Oh, you do? You actually, that is, welcome, sir." Burdin's hands were fluttering at his sides like birds about to take flight as he summoned the two waiters over, bearing menus and setting places for Tom and the girls. "It's a very unexpected treat to have a human here. Thank you, Burdin. It was a real treat for me to find you're here." Tom paused to take an offered menu, before looking back to their host. "I've started running low on things from home, so this is a pleasant surprise." "Please allow me to act as your host. You're the first human guest we've ever entertained. It will be a pleasure to get your impressions." Tom smiled and nodded affably, while the girls started tearing into the appetizer the waiters had brought over, then looked down at the menu and started to read. "I didn't know he could turn colours like that. Did you know he could turn colours like that?" whispered Melondi, before taking a bite of the bread and whatever the spread was. "No, but he looks upset. I hope it's nothing bad. I skipped breakfast for diving practice this morning and I'm starving," nodded Scifi, before tucking into a piece of her own. "At least Lark, Desi and Jax went with him. They can tell us." Nespa glanced towards the back, where the professor and the girls had gone with the manager, and picked out a piece of the bread and spread, before offering the basket over to the Kerbal girl on her left. The pair had been quiet most of the ride over, and Nespa frowned a bit, leaning in. "Are you two okay?" "How does he do it?" the girl said suddenly, looking from Nespa to all the others. "How does he tell us apart? We've been trying to figure it out for days, and he always knows." "Beats me. I can only tell sometimes, and I've known you for a while," Melondi offered tentatively. "You don't think it's some sort of human senses we haven't heard of?" "What, like smell?" asked one of the sisters, as she bit into the bread savagely. "They aren't supposed to have noses like Valkyrie or anything. I think. I mean, we only do it for fun, but we don't get it. Even our parents can't tell us apart when we try." "What is this, anyway?" asked Melondi, looking at the bread. "It's not bad, but it's kind of salty." "So, let me get this straight, Mr. Burdin." Tom started slowly, while Kellock, Deshin, and Jaxmi hovered close by. "Desari. I'm sorry, what?" "Desari is my last name. Burdin Desari." "I see, Mr. Desari." "Please, call me Burdin." Tom paused at the interruption, counting to 10. Despite the fear in his eyes, the little Shorvanti still accepted the suggestion to step into the kitchen, and was doing his best to be ingratiating. It wasn't helping very much. Right, Berdin. Let me sum this up. Your restaurant is offering human food. Tom paused as the little manager nodded a bit frantically. You have fresh ingredients coming in from a supplier on Earth. Nothing but the best. My cousin says her family is in the heart of your agricultural belt, and one of her daughters is married to the supplier. All the meat and produce is fresh as can be. They send everything. Tom watched the little show swell with pride, and Tom lowered his voice and waved a hand at one of the nearby boxes. So I see. McClendon exotic produce. Very nice. I see commercial products, too. You've got the names of things translated, but you're telling me you didn't get any recipes. Berdin ballooned up in wounded pride. Sir, I'll have you know I'm a fully qualified chef, and rated as 6 suns. But you have no actual recipes, as such. Berdin's balloon deflated. Well, that is, no. Not as such. Tom picked up the menu and stared at it, accusingly. Appetizers. Fresh bread with callus. Bacon with icing. My cousin wrote that bacon goes with everything. Berdin's protest withered and died under Tom's glare. Lunch? Tom shook himself. Chicken and... Oh, God, you didn't. Peanut butter and banana pizza. She wrote they're a popular combination. There's a choice of jelly, too. With pineapple, Tom bit out. Is one of those a problem? I came for lunch. Don't try and talk philosophy with me. Tom felt like he was going to be ill as he worked down at the menu. Food. Perfectly good food all around him. Desserts. Strawberry trout jello and lutefisk surprise. It's really salty, Scifi said between bites. At least we have bread and this stuff, but I hope there's some real food soon. I kinda like it, shrugged one of the twins. Callus is made from cod roe, Nessa read from her omnipad. What's that? Asked one of the twins, as the other chimed in. What's cod roe? It says cod is some sort of fish, and hard roe is the unfertilized eggs of a female cod, and soft roe is the sperm of a male cod. One of the Kerbals laughed at her sister, who sat frozen and stared at the bread with dawning horror. Scifi's hand clutched at her throat, as she dropped her slice on the plate and pushed it away. We're eating bread? And fish sperm? Asked Melondi with disbelief. The Kerbal girl looked at her in horror. Nesper set her omnipad down and frowned, thoughtfully. How do they even get that? Like, do they wank a fish off? Tom was vibrating with anger. He never dreamed that a fraction of the food he saw about the kitchen was present anywhere on Shill. The McClendon people had shipped some outstanding meats, produce, and even padded it all out with a variety of quality commercial goods. There were even eggs. There were fresh eggs that wouldn't expire for another week, yet what this person was doing... The injustice of the universe might well be embodied in the little man standing in front of him. Professor? Jacksme asked tentatively. Yes, Jacksme. Tom didn't look away from the chef. He still didn't know what to do now that he'd confronted the man, but this was... It just was. Well, you mentioned that you're running out of some things, and it seems Mr. Dasari has a lot. Maybe you could teach him some recipes in exchange for... I don't know. Maybe a deal for some stuff you want? It might help you both out. Berdin glanced over at the girl, eyes wide. Yes, of course. That is, if you're amenable to that, Mr. Professor Human. I'd be delighted to give that a try. So far, the only actual damage was the crumpled menu at his feet. Tom looked about him at the stocked shelves, the nervous girls just beside him, and 2 frightened cooks. Kerlark? Jacksme? Anyone? Please turn off that muzak he's playing. The 2 girls looked at each other, then scrambled for the audio system tucked into the corner. Deshin, it's time to practice your letters and numbers. Look for any bottles that say A1 on them. Setting his jaw, he peeled his jacket off. You. He glared at one of the cooks by the stove. I saw packets of ground beef. Bring me 5 of them, and I want onions, lettuce, tomatoes, and buns. You. He jabbed an imperious finger at the other cook. Yes, you. Find anything marked French fries or onion rings. The little manager trembled slightly as Tom commandeered the kitchen staff, but tried to step in and be helpful. It was his kitchen, after all. Those are next to the croutons in the freezer, but they get mushy once they defrost. Tom closed his eyes and stifled a shudder before turning back to the little chef. Mr. Dasari, we have a deal on 4 conditions. Until tomorrow, you are now running a burger bar. Burn those menus. Don't fix anything else until I come back with my cookbook. And I'm taking home a package of those tortillas, eggs, chorizo, and that serrano ham. Fine, that's fine. But didn't throw up his hands and huffed. We couldn't figure out how to get it in the fryer anyway. You were going to fry a serrano ham. Tom pinched the bridge of his nose. Mr. Dasari, you said you were hoping the Prince Regent would come by, he asked flatly. Why, yes, of course. I'm reasonably sure they would have you shot for attempted poisoning. That's a bit harsh, Budin spluttered. Budin said as he rallied. Tom picked through a selection of non-dairy cheese. He just might have executed you for a war crime.
Oh, come on. It's not actually that bad, said one of the twins to the other. I have nothing to say to you. For the first time in my life, I have nothing to say to you. The other sister wrapped her arms about her stomach. I have nothing to say about this, and we are never, ever going to talk about it ever again. Malondi lapsed into silence, while Scifi dropped her plate on a different table. Nesper gave an earthy chuckle and shrugged. I wonder if it's saltier than human sperm. So those were shizburgers, Professor? Asked Deshin, as the group rode back. Cheeseburgers. Tom emphasized the first syllable, and waggled his eyebrows happily. He'd been humming a tune that he'd explained to the girls, but had been wrapped up with looking into his bag of looted treasures. Cheeseburgers with fries and onion rings. They were really good. No wonder there's a song about them. Scifi patted her stomach contentedly. I could have eaten another one. You had 3, Malondi groused as she looked over her friend. It's not fair how you can do that. There isn't an ounce of anything on you. All food is good food if you work out enough, Scifi said with a grin. Not all food, Malondi shuddered. I never want to hear the word callous again. As your advisor, I recommend we go back tomorrow, said Deshin firmly, before looking back at Tom. That is the plan, right, Professor? Tom closed up the bag, making sure the eggs were safe, and thought about it. Yes, I promised. They don't have enough ground beef in stock to just be a burger joint, so we'll take a break from the library tomorrow. I can teach him fried chicken and 1 or 2 other things to start panning out the menu. Kerlark set aside the omnipad she seemed always to be attracted to. So, you looked pretty upset, but...
She fidgeted in her seat uncomfortably.
Nothing was going to happen, right?
Tom sighed, looking at the girls around him, and shook his head. No, nothing bad was going to happen. I guess I was just shocked out of my mind. I mean, what if someone took you to a nice restaurant and said something you just couldn't believe?
I suppose so. Anyway, I hope we didn't upset you by telling you about this place, Professor, asked one of the twins.
It's alright, Kamara. And Jacksme, thank you. I mean, really. There was some quick bargaining you did there, too. I didn't expect to get half of what's in this bag. As long as they stay open, this solves one of my biggest problems.
Biggest problem, sir? Asked Melondi with concern. Does that mean there's something else?
The rest of the girls suddenly wore worried expressions. The lunch had taken time, but if they'd messed up escorting him somehow... Oh, really, it's no big deal. When I took off my jacket and started cooking, I realized I don't have anything to wear besides these academy suits and my casual clothes. I took a look at one of the clothing replicators, but it looked like a stereo without the instructions. It looks complicated. Professor Pelavon has been talking about wearing her kimono since the other day, so I have to figure out something to wear to the big night, too.
Maybe we could help. I plan to work on some outfits for the student show that night, and I know my way around clothes, offered Jacksme before biting her lip. I'm not the best with the replicator, though.
Most of the girls nodded in agreement.
I can use it pretty well. Deshin hesitated. If you give me a hand and check my work so I don't mess up. It would be fun, please.
Melondi's voice was hopeful.
You took us out for lunch, let us try.
Nespa grinned and nudged Sefir.
Can you imagine him in good formal wear with choppings?
Tom quirked an eyebrow, as most of the girls were starting to blush. Not sure what those are, but actually there is one thing I'd really like. If she's going to wear a human kimono, I was kind of thinking of my old officer's tuxedo.
What's a tuxedo?
Asked Kellogg. It's kind of a human formal suit. I had one as an officer, and I'd have to say the Air Force officer's mess dress is one of the best looking suits ever invented, he said with pride, then frowned. Only problem is that it's also the next best thing to a parka for retaining heat. There were a couple of times I wore it that I thought I'd keel over, and that was just in a ballroom filled with people. Here on Shill, I think I'd die. It's a moot point since I don't have one here, just my family kilt and suit, and I'd probably confuse people to death wearing that. I need to come up with something to wear, though.
Oh, if it's just the heat, you can weave in cooling fibers. That's easy, said Sefir. She's right, Professor. If you show us what it looks like, we can help you out, said Deshin enthusiastically. Can you show us what it looks like?
Tom paused for an uncomfortably long moment. I do. That is, I have a picture.
Great. The replicator will take your measurements, so that's most of what we need. So, what is a kilt? Asked Nestha. And why would it confuse people?
Sefir spoke up.
Professor, since we're talking about clothes, I wanted to ask, what's a bikini? I was curious.
Take my word on it for now, Nestha, Tom hedged. But an impish smile spread across his face. Sefir, why don't you ask Professor Pelavon? I know perfectly well she can tell you.